founder of VILNIUS Books, a publishing house that is actually based here at the Faculty of Architecture, squatting the university. And Philipp Meuser is a guest of ours. Philipp Meuser is an architect and founder of Meuser Architekten, which will be celebrating 30 years ago, and is specializing in safety and security architecture, and actually is building all the German embassies in the hot areas that you want to introduce me this. And besides of that, Philipp Meuser is also a publisher, and next year it will be 20 years of Dom Publishers. That's one of the biggest architectural publishing houses in the world, which also has published architectural guides of Lithuanian cities of VILNIUS and Kaunas, and most probably later something else will come. They also have published Maria Dramaitė's book on Baltic modernism, and so many other books. And Philipp is, besides of that, he is also a writer and has written a lot of books. So I always question, how is it possible for one human being to do all of that scope? And Philipp Meuser came to the VILNIUS Book Fair for the second time. The first time he presented also the Baltic modernism together with Maria Dramaitė. And today he suggested the topic that I think it's very important and exactly for this time. So, Philipp Meuser. And the presentation, the lecture will be, is recorded and will be published on the YouTube channel of Faculty of Architecture or VILNIUS Books or somewhere else.
Thank you very much. A warm welcome from my side. So before I start talking about architecture and the question how we can help Ukraine to rebuild and to transform, I have to say a big thank you and congratulations to Ula for 10 years of VILNIUS Books. So this is the occasion why I'm here in Ukraine, here in Vilnius, talking about Ukraine. And so when Ula invited me, or actually suggested me to find a topic for talking today, of course I'm talking as a publisher, but I'm also talking as an architect. And you should also know that we launched, at Dom Publishers, we launched a special publishing program called Histories of Ukrainian Architecture. And this is something what is our response to the war of aggression. We try to focus on Ukraine, architecture in Ukraine, because I have to say that I have to admit that even I, who knows a lot about the history of Soviet architecture, I was not aware about all the details of Ukrainian architecture during the Soviet time. And so this is also a response to my personal experience and the lack of knowledge. And so at Dom Publishers, we're really trying to fill this gap of knowledge about Ukraine. And so maybe it's not a surprise for you to say. So when I was going to Kharkiv before the war, and I have a honorary professorship in Kharkiv at the Beketov University, people always say, okay, goodbye, have luck, have fun in Russia. And I told them, okay, people are talking Russian language in Kharkiv, and Kharkiv was a major city in the Russian Empire, but it is Ukraine. And for many people, it's still, maybe only due to the war, they are aware that Ukraine is existing, and Ukraine has its own identity and its own culture. So I'm talking about destruction, diversity, and design. It's a publisher's alliteration, how we can develop a housing strategy for Ukraine. So this is what I'm going to talk about. And what is important to say in the beginning, that since February 24, exactly 2 years ago, so we are facing a scenario as architects and urban planners what we never thought about before. So the literature what I'm using currently is literature from the Second World War. It's literature from Nazi authors in German. It's literature from the Cold War, late 70s and early 80s, talking about nuclear weapons and how to protect the people against a nuclear fallout. and I never thought that I need to read these books or take these books from the library and deal with these subjects. You should also know that what Ulla was mentioning, for many years, so my office, Meuser Architect, we are dealing with German embassies abroad, and most of our work is working for German embassies in crisis regions. And we were involved in a master planning for the compound of the German embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. And so this was the German embassy in January 2027 when we were involved in this project. And you see, I mean, needless to say, Kabul as a high-risk post, high-risk location, and you see all these HESCO barriers, steel plates in front of the windows, so reducing the size of the window to the minimum. The question was how we can react to the situation, high risk area, and everyone expected a terrorist attack. So there was some investigation, and everyone was saying, so there's a huge terrorist attack planned to attack the German embassy. So what happened? Luckily, the ministry decided to move all the people who work here to move to another building on the same compound, and it was really frightening. So this was May 2017. So after 6 weeks after the embassy has moved to another building, there was a terrorist attack, as if the Taliban would have waited to move out the people. So there was a terrorist attack. And this is how the embassy looked like after this attack. These are pictures never known before for German embassies. Of course, we know these kind of pictures from terrorist attacks from Kabul, from Baghdad, from other places. 9/11 in New York, all these images are in our head. So this was an example to make a proactive decision to move out people from a high-risk building. And I have to say in the very beginning that this is also important to remember, to remind. So the protection of our civil buildings on the non-military buildings is limited. And this we always need to have, we need to be aware, whatever we do as architects or as consultants for the safety and security sector, we cannot protect our residential buildings, our office buildings against direct rocket attacks or against terrorist attack like this. This was the crater, which was, you see the embassy in the background. So this was the crater. The same day people started to put in all the trash already. So how can we understand what happened? And this is what happened. So there was a truck like this. So this was the truck a few seconds before the bomb exploded. It was taken by a camera. So a truck filled with an equivalent of 6 tons TNT. So this is the equivalent what we are using to understand how big was the explosion or the impact. And this is the same amount of TNT equivalent as if we would have 9 caliber rockets. You heard about caliber rockets in the Ukraine war. So this is, I'm saying this, that the threat of a terrorist attack might be even stronger than any rocket, whereas I have to say a rocket is even more lethal because you never know where it will end up. And you have to also to add, there is not only this power or this energy of explosion, but there is also a kinetic energy which is brought into a building. So that means a single caliber rocket might have caused a similar destruction what we saw here or in this crater. Because it depends always on the construction of the building, on the type of weapon, and on the in fact of the direction how a weapon hits a building. So that means a similar building, same weapon, but different directions might cause completely different destruction. So this is also another factor which is completely, you cannot estimate it, you cannot even understand what would be the destruction through a weapon. So, and these are pictures what we know from the news. Grozny in the year 2000, Aleppo 2015, Mariupol 2022. Civil buildings destroyed by war weapons. All three examples caused by Russian military. And you see that all the buildings, it's not possible to protect these kind of buildings against weapons of war. So and we have these weapons by tanks. We have weapons like mortar, small rockets. There is a possibility to protect buildings or facilities against these kind of weapons. These are pictures taken by taken in a factory which is specialized on produce special containers for military use. But the inside of these containers look like this. So, and this is the alternative if we think about how we can protect our architecture against these kind of weapons, what I was just showing. This is the result. No windows, no breathing materials. You only have double-layered steel. And it is not a standard steel, it's high protection steel, very dense, and this is the result. So this is not, but this is not what we are looking for. So so of course for special situations and for military use, this is the only option, and we are using these kind of options. So and out of this experience working as an architect and as a consultant over the years, I tried to design, to draft some parameters where we talk about the future buildings. So how can we, in a smart way, protect our buildings by not putting different layers of steel, but think in a smarter way how we can respond to this threat. And you might remember in the first days of war, there was one high riser was hit in Kiev next to the airport in Kiev, just a kilometer away. And the problem was that the missile which hit the high riser, I assume, it was not intended to hit the high riser, it was intended to hit the military or the airport infrastructure. But due to the fact that the weapons the Russians are using are not as precise as they always say, and maybe also the people who are using these weapons are not well trained. And then something like this happens. So that means whenever you think about how to make a city more resilient, think about avoid the proximity to military infrastructure. Or if there is military infrastructure or sensitive infrastructure like an airport, try to move it to another place. This is another example. It's in Lviv. On the 6th of July last year, this part of this residential court was hit, and we have a similar situation because in this area we have military academy. So we can also assume that the building was not the main target, but it was a kind of collateral, let's say, target. So the damage on the right-hand side, 10 people died. And you see that the construction is destroyed like powder. I will show some more examples later, because the construction itself has also impact on the way how the building are falling apart. Another parameter which I would consider as crucial and very important is technical infrastructure. Where to put technical infrastructure in a large scale for a city, but also for a small scale for a building, for a plot. In the first days of war, it happened in Kharkiv. There was a gas pipeline which was hit by a rocket. The whole pipeline exploded. And luckily, the pipeline was not inside the whole microion, which is shown on the top diagram. It was outside of the there was a small distance to the residential building. But this is something you need to just think about. A gas pipeline can explode, and it can, of course, you might have some security protection and some strategies how to protect it for a time of peace. But when it comes to time of war, you never know when and where something is hit. So in this case, it was a huge explosion, and the whole street was exploding. So also consider this in a large scale if you think about future microions or future residential areas. Try you should think about that sensitive infrastructure should be placed somewhere else, but not underneath a residential building. This is quite simplified, saying one in, two out. So what does it mean? So in the first days of war, we had the case that huge cities and smaller cities had to be evacuated. And if you are going to evacuate a city like Kiev, you really have problems like this. So a traffic jam, so this street going out of the city. For hours, the people were stuck in the traffic jam, and you see only a few cars going inside the city, but most of them going out. And the streets were not sufficient to have so many cars. So that means whenever you think about a future residential area, so we should not always think about that there will be this case of war. So I'm trying to also think about, when we talk about safety and security issues, we might have some other benefits. And if you think about, so this is the typical, I would say, socialist microion. And if you consider some microions from VILNIUS, from Soviet times, you have a typical structure. So the microions, they have no through traffic. They only have direct traffic inside, outside. In terms of livability and quality of life inside this area, it's not that bad. But you should also think about why not to have a special emergency exit in case something is happening. And I'm not saying it is always the case that there is a weapon or there's a rocket targeting this area. There might be some other events. I don't know, a broken water pipe, a big fire or something. So you might be stuck inside this residential area. So always, if possible, think about, even in a larger scale, to have an emergency exit, so that these pictures, I mean, this is so we have to admit this is a one and only situation. So it's not, you don't have that every Sunday morning that people are trying to escape from a city. But just imagine, in case, or if you are going to design a new neighborhood, think about, there might be a case where you have to evacuate a whole microion. So then, next issue. So if I have a block, or let's say a residential area of high rises, and there's one explosion in the center, in between, you can just count, and you have, with one explosion, and the problem is the blast. So the explosion itself is not the biggest problem or issue, because this is just a fireball. It could also be lethal and also very dangerous, but even more dangerous is the blast of this explosion. And with one blast of the explosion, you destroy so many buildings or so many apartments. If the buildings are lower and you have explosion in between two buildings, the number of destroyed apartments is smaller. So now we cannot change the whole world. But what I was also thinking about is, if we think about for future cities, that we try to avoid the high rises standing too close to each other, we can also avoid to have too much shadow, which is another issue. And if we talk about the quality of life, maybe we have to reduce the number of floors. And if we would have another explosion here, less apartments or less parts of the building would be destroyed. So I'm also trying to combine safety and security issues with issues of quality of public spaces. And when it comes to the scale of a building, so you remember I showed you these examples of the reinforced facades with this double layered steel. There is also a possibility to cover or to make a shattering layer around the building, because the biggest impact of explosion is if a rocket or if any explosion is directly on the facade. So if you try to design or to have a distance of the explosion, the impact is smaller. So this is the same with the distance of a building on a plot. If you have it standing just next to the street and there's an explosion in the street, the building might be destroyed. But if you move the building 30, 40, 50 meters away, the impact or the destruction is smaller. But we need to be aware that this makes only sense by financial issues for the military infrastructure, and we cannot expect that we can change the whole environment. And I made a calculation. If we have a two-section Khrushchevka with 5 floors, it has 3,000 square meter surface, and if you have a shattering layer like this, you would need 3,500 square meters just to cover 2 Khrushchevka. And just imagine 3,500 square meters. And a square meter of such kind of construction, it's just a meshed metal surface. You can use it because the idea behind is that you have this shattering layer, that the trigger of the explosion is just not on the facade, but it is moved, in this case 2 meters. It helps a lot, but it does not give 100% safety, but at least some safety. So, and how does this look like? So we did also for Kabul. So we did some test design how these buildings could look like. So in general, you order by a manufacturer these kind of containers, highly protected, with double steel, and you have a shattering roof. So this underneath the roof is empty, and it just helps if there is mortar coming and explodes on the roof. The destruction inside, so everything will shake, and if you have some furniture, it can fall down, and some lamps can fall down, but at least you can survive. And this was another design, also to have a shattering roof and some other shattering layer, and you can make a design out of it. And if you don't have any windows, you can do some paintings. In this case, quite famous in Kabul, the so-called warlords. They call themselves art lords. The warlords, but they called themselves the art lords. They were painting all these concrete walls inside the city, so you can do some artworks out of it. But in fact, this is very privileged. So this is not a solution for everyday life. But it is possible, and I also support the idea or the strategy that even for this kind of architecture, there must be also some beauty and some aesthetics. So we can also, as architects, also demand some aesthetics. So I was already mentioning the kind of construction which is crucial for the question how resilient is a building when it comes some impact by weapons. I'll show you again this like powderized construction in Lviv. So it's just yeah, so no strength against this impact. And I would say this is so wooden construction is the most weak construction. So the construction with the brick stone, also very weak construction. And this is a picture from this high riser which was hit on the second day of war. You see this missile hitting one corner, and this is how it looked inside. And you can just understand these are structural elements, 50, 60 centimeters, high reinforced concrete elements, and it just deformed like plastic, but still it still holds. And if you go there today, you won't see it anymore that there was such kind of destruction because it is fixed already. But you see that even this reinforced structure is just deformed as if there would be some soft element. And I'm just showing this is just a completely new subject for us as architects and engineers to think about. So another issue or another subject, also this design task, support building shelters. In the first months or weeks of war, in big cities in Ukraine, these kind of public shelters appeared, and you see that they are also designed. So you can also understand military or protection shelter against military weapons as a design task. Then also quite popular and back in the building regulations in Ukraine, shelters in the basement. So each residential building must have a shelter. And also for this case, think about, in this case, it's a newly built residential complex. They are using the parking garage. So the parking garage they transformed into this shelter. And what made me so shocked, you know, it's a tent what you can buy in IKEA. So it's an infrastructure. What we know as Europeans, we know you go to IKEA and you buy this kind of tent for your child, and then you see the same furniture or the same products you see in a shelter in Ukraine, and people are protecting themselves against weapons. On the right-hand side, it's a safe room which is highly popular in Israel. So in Israel, so most of this strategy comes from Israel. So the public shelters in Israel, you have within 5 minutes you can find in any public space, you can find a public shelter. You have in the basement, you have a shelter, and people have in a newly built apartment, they have a shelter inside the building, inside the apartment, because this is also what was my own experience and experience from Ukrainian colleagues and friends. If you have permanent air raid alarm in the night, you don't dress up, leave your pajama, and then go to the elevator, go down to the basement, and wait until the air raid is over. Sooner or later, you stay in your apartment. And what is the biggest risk? Not the biggest, but one of the biggest risks in your apartment. So if the rocket is not hitting your building and everything is destroyed, broken glass. Broken glass is the most lethal and injuring threat, or let's say, or injuries what you can have when it is the blast is coming and the window is bursting, and then so the small pieces are really the biggest danger when it comes to explosions. So these are strategies how to respond to people, how they can protect before something is happening. And this is how they look like in Dnipro. When they were done within a few weeks, developed and then produced. But you see even here, it is at least some design. And if you take more time, you could design it much better. And I think this might be also a design task for students or whoever, but also another response to the war. So this is how such kind of safe room can also look like. This is a picture from an embassy. So we have similar scenarios, or let's say similar brief. That so this is a safe room for 36 people, and they have to be. And the safe room is going to be used for 36 people, 72 hours. You have your own water system, your own ventilation, and even your own electricity. So this is these are, but it could be always different. So you have some safe rooms for 72 hours, another for 24 hours. The most important thing is always ask whenever you have a design task or a planning task, what is the scenario? And the scenario here is just to understand what are the parameters. German military is able within 72 hours to pick up embassy stuff any place in the world, but they need, so the maximum what they need is 72 hours. So this was the parameter why this had to be planned for 72 hours. Another country might be only 24 hours, so it's always difficult. But these are the design parameters. So what is the result? So protection against threats remains uncertain and unknown, especially in times of war. We never know when something is happening, what is happening, and what is the impact, and who is our enemy, or who is the attacker. And that means a certain risk will always remain. So you cannot. So if someone tells you no risk anymore, forget it. So there will be always a risk, and as an architect, as a consultant, you can only reduce the risk. And what is also important to say, the planning procedure and the decision-making procedure is so long and so slow that you cannot. So when the enemy is already hitting the border and is moving to the city, it's much too late to start thinking about the protection of the building. Forget it. The only thing is you can evacuate and just go away. So that means you have to make a proactive decision, and this is what I start talking about. Even in non-Ukrainian cities and countries, we need to think about how we can make our cities more resilient in case something will happen in the future. So we don't know when, where, and what is the impact, what kind of threat or what kind of scenario we will have. But I think we need to think about that we have to be prepared for these kind of questions. So in the case of Ukraine, so when we talk about reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine, so what is also very crucial, you need to collect data. So and this is also something you can start even now. You can start right away from tomorrow. You can start collecting data and collect data and knowledge to be prepared in case you have this design task, or you have to make your city more resilient. So I'm just trying to switch a little bit what I'm also doing currently, and together with Katerina Malaya, who is teaching in the US, also architect, we are working on a catalog of Ukrainian housing facilities, housing series, and iconic buildings from the past 100 years. And this is also kind of response to this war of aggression. as the Russians say, there's no Ukrainian identity. So we try to respond by doing a book collecting and summarizing 100 years of housing architecture in Ukraine. And these are the chapters. Maybe it might not be a surprise for you, but parts of Ukraine used to be Polish, the western part of Ukraine. The eastern part, with Kharkiv as the capital of Ukrainian SSR, was a center of the so-called constructivism, architecture. We can find much more constructivist architecture in the eastern part of Ukraine than we can find in St. Petersburg or in Moscow. And of course we have this era of socialist realism starting at the end of modernism, then first and second series of the large panel housing, late Soviet and early post-Soviet, and then turbo capitalism and urban renaissance as a period where what is happening today. What is important to say is we consider the start of Glasnost in 84 as a new era. So we also try to have a new narrative of the Ukrainian history. So if we would have drafted a new chapter or some chapters, we might have said, okay, so there was a period from 1958 when the large panel housing started in 1991, because the collapse of the Soviet Union was in 1991. And so this is also something I'm just telling you as a scholar that, and I'm just addressing to the young generation. When you talk about, or when you do your own research, so be brave enough to think about and to ask yourself questions if the narrative, what you are told in the lectures, in your seminars, is that something you would also follow, or do you think you might change something? So I tell you another story to explain what I mean. So at Dom Publishers, we're also doing the architectural guides. We did this guide on VILNIUS and Kaunas. And most of our authors, they have chapters chronologically of historical years. And it's quite obvious that for most of the authors, there was a cut in the world history 1990. So whenever they send us a draft of how they divide the chapters, you can, in 95%, you have one chapter ending 1990 and a new chapter starting 1990 till today. So I always tell them, okay, what about rethinking these chapters? Because from 1990 to today, it's 34 years already. Maybe we have another chapter in between. Maybe there was a chapter 1990 till 2010. And this is I'm just saying this, that also this was something we were discussing in the beginning. What is the order? And if you think about the Soviet period, let's say, you always have constructivism, Stalinism, and Soviet modernism, the second modernism. But why not to rethink this? So this was just an excursion. So this is what is representing a building from Lviv, built around 1930. It's Bauhaus architecture, very modern. I have also to admit it was also, I knew that there was some modern architecture in Lviv, but I was not aware that it was that high quality. This period of Stalinism, you can find in every middle-sized city in Ukraine, you can find this kind of, how you call it, cake architecture, or Stalinist architecture. Then we have this period of the large panel housing. We have a period of, let's say, the period of independence, where everything was possible, like this wave building in Kiev. But we also identified a period or a new generation of buildings. I'm just showing in the very end, I show some examples, what is happening Ukraine during the war, so to say. So why is such a big focus on Soviet buildings? I was highlighting these panel buildings, so I don't want to make it tired with all the numbers. So what is the most important outcome? 2/3 of the total housing estate in Ukraine was built in the late Soviet, during the second Soviet modernism, so between 1955 and 1991. So I make this is a chapter now, 1955 till 1991, because this is the period where 2/3 of the housing estate was built. And after 1991, nothing happened to this estate. So there was no facility management, that people were using this, and this is, the buildings are not breaking apart, but the quality is decreasing and decreasing. And when we talk about a transformation and a modernization of the housing estate in Ukraine, which is due, not only due to the fact that some of them have been destroyed during to the impact of war, but they need to be renovated. And that's the reason why we focus so much on these panel buildings. And I just show you some examples. Also, what quality was built during that time, and we also use it as a memory what is happening with all these buildings, and this is also a proof. I mean, we all know already, but the Russians always say, so we are not targeting civil buildings, we are only targeting military infrastructure, but in fact, residential buildings are hit all over Ukraine. So just keep in mind, the series 1464, they are spread all over the former Soviet Union. They were even exported to Eastern Europe, to Cuba, and from Cuba to Chile even. You have that everywhere in the former socialist world. The system 464, and our idea and the strategy is also to collect information about this series, combined with pictures of the destruction. So this is series KG 480, because once you have make an analysis of one destroyed building and you know how to reconstruct it, and even by reconstructing the damage by war, why not to use this modernization also to modernize the energy system and some other refurbishments. So by the way, maybe this might be also a question, what is there any system behind all these series numbers? You might say, okay, this was 464, and then there were some others, and then there was 480. I can tell you there is not really a system. So there's one colleague, Dmitry Sadorin. He has been working, I think now 6 or 7 years on the genealogy of the Soviet housing. So his PhD will be published very soon, and I hope that we will find some, let's say, some answers to this question of this miracle of the series numbers. Another series. So one of the few systems what exists, this Roman 2, so 257, is always indicated that this was developed in Moscow by a project institute where the series number was always this Roman 2. But you see another building in Kharkiv destroyed, and this is in Zaltivka, one of the areas in the northern part, destroyed in the first weeks of war. Of course, we also tried this in Lviv, another residential area, mainly built with the series 84. So we're just collecting all the series. Some of the series were developed by Ukrainian architects, by a Kiev-based institute. This one was, we have to admit and we have to accept that this is a series which was developed in Moscow. And another series also spread all over Ukraine, mainly in the southern and eastern part, the series '94. This is a picture taken in Dnipro in last year, but the building was hit in January earlier. I think several dozens of death casualties. And of course, we also try to collect information about Donbass, occupied territories, because we consider this also as part of Ukraine. So that means doing this or publishing this catalog on Ukraine housing estates and series, it's also a kind of political statement to indicate that Crimea and Donbass are part of Ukraine, and it has the right to be listed in this catalog. So it's just an overview of what we are doing. So the book is going to be published in fall, 2 years later than we thought in the beginning, but I would assume that it might be quite a valuable research, and also to strengthen the identity or our knowledge on Ukraine. So I promised to show you some examples of buildings, of residential buildings which were finished during the war. I know if you heard about Sulik architects based in Lviv, they so within 3 months these two buildings were designed and built for pregnant women and young mothers, IDPs, internally displaced people. Very simple but high quality of design, a wooden construction, and this is something what we find in many places in Ukraine. Do-it-yourself project south of Lviv. People are using a timber construction, and this is hempcrete. It's the cannabis plant, hanf, plus some cement. A traditional building material in Ukraine, and so we can estimate, or we can expect that it's a kind of renaissance of these kind of materials. I would estimate, due to a new understanding of how we do architecture today with a circular building and recyclability of building. But on the other hand, we have also to understand that people are using very cheap materials because they have not so many resources to use all this high technology. So it is low tech, low budget, do it yourself, but in the end it's also a contribution to a new way of architecture. And I also had a possibility to visit a concrete factory, a panel building factory in Odessa, and they are using the most advanced technologies to use a glass fiber concrete, material what you can use less than 2 centimeters, and you can design any kind of materials. So all this is all prefabricated. I'm not saying that this is the way how we should understand our future architecture, but so this is not massive. So this just it's hollow inside, and this is also Ukraine. And this is Ukraine 2022, and there is high technology, low technology, and I'm very confident that we can expect high quality architecture from all our colleagues. And I'm always asking, so are you going to rebuild Ukraine? And I always say no. I don't need to, because there are so many architects in Ukraine who can do it themselves. The only thing what I can do is just to let's say raise some awareness on some questions and to consult. But I'm very confident that Ukraine can do it themselves. But of course we should not stop to support the colleges. And what is my last message today? So when we talk about all these safety and security issues, we must not forget that there's also quality of life. So we don't want to live in these high protected double-layered steel containers. So we have to think about how we can keep the quality of our Western or culture of freedom, which is the highest value what we have. thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy for questions. Maybe you're overwhelmed with all these information. I saw that some of you took some pictures. You have the presentation. You can share it among the
it's just
audience.
easier for me.
Okay, no problem. So,
can I ask a question?
Sure.
On your last note, you were quite rightly pointing out that we can be confident that the talent and energy in Ukraine will reconstruct the country. On the other hand, Norman Foster did a visit there at the end of and attracted some criticism for that. Is that criticism that you would share, or was it legitimate?
No. I was told the story behind, and maybe all of you should know that it was Norman Foster who announced, I think, a couple of weeks after the war started, that he's going to make a master plan for Ukraine. He was very much criticized by Western architects, but also by Ukrainian architects, because everyone thought, okay, now Norman Foster is coming like the prophet and just bringing happiness and new life to Ukraine. So as far as I was told, it was a more or less public or semi-public discussion or talk on Ukraine. And Norman Foster was participating as a kind of UN ambassador, and in this round, or in this meeting, he was asked directly by the mayor of Kharkiv if Norman Foster would like to help them to develop a new master plan as a response to this destruction what we saw in Saltivka, and this is how it started. So that means I'm not involved in the project, and I don't know too many details, but what I know is it was not Norman Foster to go there just to bring his knowledge to the world. He was asked, and I mean, any help is needed in the moment, and if he succeeds in communicating and integrating local colleagues, I think why not? Sure.
Probably it's a follow-up question, because what we are now following, in a few days there will be exactly 2 years after the aggression, and can we see different waves of response, especially the Western response to rebuilding Ukraine, because this Norman Foster story was very prompt response just after the aggression. And then everybody somehow had imagination that the war will last not very long. There will be quick responses, and there will be a big necessity of Western support to rebuild the cities. And many different proposals were, and there will be the big pool for development money, funding, etc. But now, in the long run, when we see those 2 years, and we don't know when it will end in general, and what is in your presentation, what caught my eye is even repairing of these destroyed houses, how it is possible to reinforce them with the new technology and with the new knowledge and with the new preparation for war. There was also this discussion that should we rebuild these houses at all? Maybe it's better to demolish them fully, to clear out the area and build new houses with the new technologies, lower, more protected, etc. But it needs resources again. And of course, we had a very strong response from local Ukrainian architects that we can do it. We know better how to rebuild our cities. With Maxim Holovka, with his manual for quick rebuilding, etc. So, what is your observation in this? That it is not a quick war, but it will be a long war probably, and how it should proceed.
To answer this question, I think we can do a whole conference on this.
Of course,
because I mean, maybe you are aware. We have a situation in Ukraine that we have this super home ownership. So, like I think it's the same what happened in Lithuania. The same. So, everyone who was living in his apartment, he became the owner of the apartment. I would be interested in how it worked in Lithuania, but I can tell you that in Ukraine the problem is that you own the inside of your apartment, but you do not even own a part of the roof or a part of the staircase or a part of the ground. And not being an owner of a ground, and I assume in Lithuania this has changed, because if you are a homeowner, you are also owner of a part of the ground, because this is the only value what you can give to the bank to receive some money to invest. It has not yet happened in Ukraine. And this makes it so complicated. And I was involved before the war, I was involved in a reconstruction project, in a possible reconstruction project, where each owner of a building, of an apartment, would have received 5,000 euros to renovate the energy system of his apartment. 5,000 euros. But this 5,000 euros would only have been paid if the homeowner would also have invested 5,000 euros. So how many people in Ukraine can afford to pay 5,000 euros to renovate a heating system which is running for 50 years and which will run another 10, 20 years? So that's really a problem. And so that means it starts from the ownership and how to organize a whole community of people living in one residential building. Who is going to make the decision that the whole building will be renovated? So this is what I'm talking about, the whole housing estate, which needs to be transformed. And what as far as I know, if you are living in a building and your apartment has been destroyed by a rocket, so what happens to the next apartment, which is not destroyed, but the whole infrastructure doesn't work anymore? So as far as I stand, there is the city who gives some money to do some immediate repairment, and some of the destruction has been repaired already. But you were asking what is my observation? My observation is that all these state programs, also from European countries, they were still running programs ending by the end of 2022 or ending by 2023, which have been launched a couple of years earlier. And only now, starting this year, new programs have been installed to do some renovation works. And this, in the moment, I understand that there are different pilot projects showing how to reconstruct a building, how to repair some damages, and then this European understanding of if we give some money, it's not just money, just do some repair, but we expect energy saving, social impact, maybe also beautification of the public space. So there's a political task also for the people, and this is now starting. And I would expect that in the next 1 or 2 years, different pilot projects will be realized, and then they can work as a reference then based on all the different series types. Once you have repaired a series 94 at Dnipro, why not to use this information or this experience in Kryvyi or in Zaporizhzhia? So this is what is happening. So I mean, this is our democracy in Europe. So if we respond for a long-term strategy, it starts a little bit slower. So but I'm not saying that. Let's say the slowness in making a decision, maybe it's not that bad, and we can make it more sustainable. But it's once you enter housing, it is so complex, and everyone. I mean, we are architects, we know how to do it, but everyone is living somewhere, and everyone had changed some wallpaper or some repairment, so everyone thinks he knows how to deal with residential architecture and with all this housing market. It is so complex, and so many people are talking about. So the response could only be do it step by step and try to talk about and exchange ideas and make it everything open source and transparent so that everyone can learn from each other.
Thank you for an interesting lecture. It's a shame we have to touch this topic But I want to ask a practical question. There's a lot of rubble now in Ukraine, Eastern Ukrainian cities. Do you think it would be meaningful to use that rubble to build physical barriers to guard of future invasion? Like taking Munich, I know Olympic Hill was formed using the rubble. So prior to invasion, everyone thought that the future wars will ignore the geographical barriers. But now we see that geographical barriers do matter. Do you think it's possible and practical, or do you think it's like?
I mean, the rubbles and the debris what we have, or what Ukraine might collect from all this destruction, it's huge. And of course, sooner or later there will be a question what to do. And of course, there are discussions and ideas how to recycle these kind of materials. And part of even the concrete panels, you can crack them and use the steel and recycle the steel. But what to do with all this old concrete pebbles and damage? So you can use it for streets, of course, but not so many streets need to be repaired. So it's just too much, and maybe just using that as, I don't know if that is to have another Olympic Hill somewhere in Ukraine just to protect the city. It's a question I cannot really respond to that. But what I can say in the beginning, I was in a quite naive way. I was thinking, why not to recycle panels from a panel building which has been destroyed or which needs to be deassembled because you cannot live there anymore. So this is something you can. This is a strategy you cannot follow because they are all welded, which is other. So if you try to, of course it is possible, and we have some examples in Germany from this. Let's say, we have this phenomenon of shrinking cities in the eastern part of Germany, and so many residential buildings from socialist time has been demolished, and there are some examples where architects were using these panels and do a small one family home, but this is too expensive and it's not feasible. And in Ukraine, we have another problem that 60%, what I know, 60% of the materials for the roofs, it's made with asbestos. And once it is destroyed by weapons, you have this asbestos going into the air. So that you have contamination by the building materials from the Soviet times. And you also have another problem that due to the weapons and the fire caused by the weapons, we have contaminated materials, and some of the materials is not usable anymore. It's too toxic. So that means that also this question is very, very sensitive and very complex. And what our, let's say, grandparents and great-grandparents did after the war in Germany, these huge hills. We have a huge hill in Berlin as well, and in each bigger city you have such kind of hills where they collected all these broken debris from the buildings. So, I mean, sooner or later there must be a decision to be made what to do. But if they are going to use it to protect the city against a future attack, I can't tell you.
Do you have a figure for the percentage of damaged housing?
Yeah, so the last figure what I had was around 7% of the housing estate, but it's very sensitive and these numbers, because you never know if is it damaged or is it not used anymore, and is it really destroyed. What I was saying, collecting data is crucial if you think about the reconstruction. But what I heard is around 7% somehow damaged or destroyed, which is a huge number. But on the other hand, I mean, we are aware a third of the whole country is refugee. So it's 1/3 IDPs, internal displaced people, and another third outside in European countries. It's so, and this will cause another problem with what is going to happen after the war. Not all the people will go back, and if they go back, they might not go to a small village. They will move to a city. So that means we have completely different other problems coming to Ukraine. So,
is that factory in Odessa still building panel system housing?
pardon?
Is the Odessa factory you showed us with the lightweight cladding? Are they still making panel housing?
Yeah,
with that system?
yeah. So for me, it's not a surprise, but it might be a surprise for some people that panel housing is. So we know that there is a renaissance of panel housing, and the technology itself has not so much changed. So what has changed is that the buildings can be built and planned much more individual than it was before. So this is what's happening. So again, this how to pour the concrete and how to lift this produced panels is still the same technology, but what has changed is that each panel can be individually changed, including with all the infrastructure inside. And we have that in Ukraine. We have newly built factories also in Germany for prefabrication, but not only concrete, but also timber panels. And there's also all the Russian cities. They have the most modern Western technology for all these concrete panels, mainly from Italy, Germany, Austria. So the technology is still ongoing, and it's. I'm always saying, so the technology itself, it's not that bad. Yeah, so it's only the scale and the repetition of the same building. That is something what is not the best solution.
One more question, if I may. Do you have an opinion or take on the concept of war wilding? There's this idea that unfriendly countries should have a green belt between them to avoid this straight contact. So it's like a few scientists, I don't remember their names, they noticed that, as I said before the war, everyone thought that geographical barriers, they don't matter. But when the war started in Ukraine, what they did, they flooded the Irpin river. And so, because for 70 years, the river was contained into I understand, one straight line. They flooded it. So the attacking army, they had a really narrow path to follow. So it could be because of this natural flooding, the Ukrainians could protect themselves and to stop that attacking army. So because there's such a great need for wilding, so these people thought of maybe using, this occasion of tragic war happening for the purpose of making this territory which suffered from the war, maybe it should be just left for the wilderness. So we see Chernobyl, area around Chernobyl, the nature is thriving. So imagine Kaliningrad being a free ecological zone. Sorry.
I have to admit that this is a scale. As an architect, I'm not thinking about this scale. So my scale is the building and the city, and not these, let's say, spatial planning. What you're talking about. So what I'm not a military expert. So what I can only observe is that also this war shows us that the let's say the conventional war. It's not a chapter of our history. The conventional war is also part of our present, and then it matters what is the geographical situation, and of course it matters if I'm flooding fields with water, or if I destroy a dam in Cherson, it has impact on the strategy of a conventional war. And this is what we learn, that this might be not the end of this conventional war. So that we will, and how would you try to implement this idea of having a barrier in between two unfriendly states? So that
Israel does that. It plants trees in desert next to Egypt with an idea that once the trees grow, it will act as, you know, to protect from heavy machinery and whatever. So it's not very new, but of course it's very difficult to grow a tree in the desert with irrigation, etc.
And this is also
in northern Ukraine, I imagine it's possible. Maybe it's more difficult in steppe kind of biome.
Yeah, but Israel, you have, I don't know. If I compare Israel and the border with Egypt, maybe it's 50 kilometers. But if you compare it with the border between NATO and Belarus and Russia, you would have, I don't know, 3,000 kilometers. How you can protect a border of 3,000 kilometers? And it would mean that so I would not assume that the Russians give 50 kilometers of their part to use it as a barrier. So you would need to use your own territory to have a barrier, and it owns two private people. And
the French tried it in 1936 with
yeah,
the Maginot Line, which wasn't very effective.
Yeah, and the German used Belgium to conquer. So it's
the Czechs had a smaller version as well.
Yeah. So it's very difficult. But of course these are, you know, I was asking some questions. So how to protect in future, how we plan in future, what are the parameters? But these are parameters for the spatial planning. So why not to think about this? Sure. So you have also a question.
Yeah, thank you very much for really great talks, so very interesting. I was just thinking it's this very idea that you can use spatial planning anticipating emergencies. That's really. But that's very interesting, and it's interesting how it connects to the Cold War history and anticipating nuclear war that led to suburbanization of American cities, and in turn created further issues in relation to land use, traffic commuting, segregation, and so on. I just wonder if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more how this housing strategy that you propose fits with climate resilience as well. I guess the most controversial bit is, of course, low rises might be nice and more human, but this also leads to a greater land use.
Yeah. Thank you for this question, because I can respond to that. Yes.
How do you combine these different?
Yeah. So I'm a supporter of the typology of European city. And when we talk about, so if we would implement what I was showing in these diagrams, so we would have so these settlements from the modern times, and a green landscape, or let's say urban landscape all over the country. So I'm not a fan of that, and not a supporter of that. So so it was just to show what is the conflict of interest. So and this is what. So my last. So we must not forget the quality of urban life. So take Vilnius. So the quality of Vilnius is that we have this low-rise building just standing next to each other. We have narrow streets, maybe not usable for big traffic and for big trucks, but it's a nice European city, and this is a very high quality. And in Ukraine, so if we talk about Ukraine, so what I was just saying, we will face the problem that cities will have a reduced number of citizens. So that means we we must forget about new territories to develop for new housing. So I think if we think about the transformation of Ukrainian cities, we also have to think about densifying existing cities. And especially if you have a shrinking population, you immediately face the problem of the infrastructure is not prepared for reduced people. So that means you have to change and transform your whole infrastructure. It's just a wastewater canal in a channel or a wastewater system in a street. If you have a huge high density neighborhood, the wastewater system is usable and you can use it. But once only the half of the people are living there, the wastewater system it's not working anymore because you do not have enough people who are using it. So huge problems will arise. So that means we have to think about how to densify some certain areas so that the infrastructure can be used again and then continue used. So this is it is so complex, and this is why I'm supporting also these pilot projects. Start a pilot project or different dozens of pilot projects, make mistakes and you will have success and you will have mistakes, but we have to do it or get some experience by just doing, try and error. So I think this is what we can do in the moment, because as long as the war is continuing, we cannot think about a sustainable reconstruction of whole Ukraine, because the building you build today could be destroyed tomorrow. And there is always a question of financing. Someone has to give some money. If it is not public money by a state, there will be private money. And I would only invest into infrastructure when I have some kind of guarantee that it is not destroyed tomorrow by a weapon. So try and error and start doing some experiments. I mean, these times of war would also allow doing some experiments on how to respond, how to reconstruct, how to rebuild, and it's so complex. But so when we are going to talk about rebuilding and reconstruction, we should also think about doing some renovation and modernization. So not only do the same mistakes which were done 50 years ago, but we are living in a new time, new period, and we have to also modernize. But it's so difficult because each apartment is owned by someone else. Some people left the country, will never return. You know, in Germany we still have issues with land plots which are untouched for the past 80 years because no one really knows who is the owner. It's some Jewish heirs of families. I don't know. And then after 3 or 4 generations, there you have 50 people who own a small piece of land, and they all must sign until a land plot can be sold. So it is really it's an issue you have to address. Last question.
I have probably the last one question. It's quite a practical one because can you make your suggestions about the sheltering? We saw very nice examples you showed about the building sizes, how it may affect the damage outcome. But let's say regarding the sheltering system, recently I heard one colleague saying that they luckily found a place in Vilnius where they can fit 100,000 people, somehow parking space or what. But that idea what makes me terrified, because we remember what happened in Mariupol when the theater was demolished up to the basement, and recent development of war techniques in Avdiivka, we saw that the enemy quite well mastered the technique of dropping aerial bombs from large distances and very large capacity bombs to make destruction even to the underground structure. So maybe what you're suggesting is maybe we can switch better to the network of sheltering of smaller scale units, or we still stick to the massive spaces for large amount of the people.
So the best strategy how to respond to your enemy is to use the same strategy, and if you use so I would never suggest to have a shelter for 100,000 people, but this is a rule from military. I think I just read today that there was Ukrainians hit. They killed 60 soldiers in a battlefield because they were collected by the commanders for something, and they found out with a drone and hit because they were all gathering. So, and this is the same. So if you try to attack the enemy, so try to hide yourself in the same strategy, not to have. I was told in military, when I was entering military, you are atomic, how do you call it? So don't stand together, because the enemy will shoot one time and hit two soldiers. So just have some distance from each other, and this would be the response. But the best strategy would to evacuate the city, and not to stay in the city. But you know that comes next question. If you talk to refugees so when are you going to leave your home? What must happen that you are leaving the home? So I'm always questioning myself, when Jews in Germany made a decision to leave Germany? Was that 1933? Was it 1938? Or was it 1942? So when is the time you leave your home? I'm not in the situation that I have to make a decision in the moment, but if you talk to refugees, this is one of the first questions I had. What was your decision, or when your decision was made to leave your home? When did you leave Ukraine? What happened? And this is a very difficult question, because you leave your country, you are a foreigner in the other country, even if you're accepted and recognized as a refugee. But I talk to many Ukrainians, they go back to Ukraine because this is their home. So that means, but the best strategy is to evacuate and to leave the battlefield before it is too late. But when is that? We don't know. So many unanswered questions. I'm sorry for that. But you know, if you go home today and you continue thinking about that, there is that parameter, safety, security is another parameter added to social security, added to energy saving, recyclability, whatever all the complex topics we discuss in architecture, please add safety and security.